Hi, everyone. This is Vicente Cruz, Oakland Greens event and fundraising coordinator, and we are already starting into our serious discussion, and it's going deep down the rabbit hole today. Our main topic is what would a green police system look like? How do we reshape what enforcement of rules that communities have decided are best for everyone, the majority, and how do we enforce that? Um, Before we get that started, we were also talking, which does tie into buildings and logistics for housing personnel, but we're talking about climate change and how does records and then also police corruption and how all of these things are traumatizing to people. And I would put out too that even just the day to day, the fact that we can somehow in our brains rationalize walking by people in need on a hourly basis, every day, all the time, no matter what, if you're just trying to go to the store, you're walking your dog, everything. And all of that is trauma. Everything is trauma. So now you're living in this whole world where from anytime you can realize something to the time when you're about to die, uh, you're living in that energy and how it is so difficult to get any of the things that we're doing, unless people can really realize. I think, well, my own idea would be a real general strike, but if people just sat down and like don't participate, just refuse to participate, right, and just collectively decide that I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Or at least, or as I say, navigating a corrupt capitalist system, figure out how to limit your participation as much as possible. I do think that might work too. But that is a discussion for another time. When I sent out the email and stuff, had talking points. There was services, transportation, weapons, personnel, and buildings. I don't know if anyone I don't think any of us cares where we start first. So I can just go in order and we can then have a discussion on each of those talking points. So for me, what a green police system would look like as far as what type of services it would put out. The easiest ones would be, of course, mental health services. So non-armed officers who are actually trained medical professionals, psychiatric professionals that could be set out, even for counselors set out for like domestic abuse. It doesn't have to be mental health issues, but just at a time that there's arguments that go on, barbecues or whatever, you can have these people to dispatch and then be able de-escalation techniques, and again having not being higher educated in counseling services. Now you have actual experts out there, because we all know police officers are not experts in mental health services. If anything, as we started talking about trauma, they are suffering from serious trauma as well. High alcoholism rate, suicide rate, domestic abuse, and things like that too, trafficking of girls and all of those things as well. So then you could even have it inside where they could have those services too. So those are type of things, again, where it's not just mental health services. It can be also community building events. Like right now, they try to do these things where they'll send the officers in to read books to elementary school students or something. But they go in their full, like, armed uniform, right? Just like a regular old beat cop. I have always put out that that also is some weird psychological mind fuck that they're trying to do, especially when they go into the lower income, poverty stricken schools, telling the kids, like, look, I'm going to be your overseer soon. Get used to this as an authority figure, right? And what they're wearing. And at the same time, you can go into more affluent schools and they're like, look, I'm your friend. And this is also the uniform I wear. Two totally, same thing, but two totally different points of view. And I think it should be, and especially you're reading a fucking children's book, you don't need an armed officer. You need someone, again, maybe it's someone that has education, child development skills background going inside of those services as well. You know, you're now bringing in a higher clientele of applicants, right, as well, that want to be law enforcement, and changing it that way. It can be services assisting to fire as well. And I think also I would take a stance too where rarely would there need for armed officers, right? You know, you can't learn how to, you know, Taekwondo training and blunt weapons, right? And I do understand that America is fully armed like crazy. You have anything on services? Questions?
Yeah, I have a question for you, Vicente. I'm just curious, while you were in the Navy, were you ever forced into shore patrol?
Oh, of course.
Of
Everybody has to
course.
pull when you're out at sea. Everybody has to pull shore patrol duty. Yeah.
Uh, I asked you this question because I too was at one time, you know, a cop on
Yeah.
the water,
Right.
involving you know, people who are doing wrong things in the ocean,
Right.
or in the bay.
Right.
And what it may be the most practical thing we possibly can do at this point is try to prevent the police from escalating some kinds of situations which even I didn't know how to do.
Right.
I really found the whole thing very stressful, a tough job to do. When all of a sudden you have a platoon boat, for example, that's tied up to a seagoing buoy, so ships can't see the buoy if they're trying to stay off the rocks coming into Portland, Maine's harbor.
Right.
I got to go up there, and I've got to deal with people who look to me, they're not a group of high school kids having fun.
Right.
They're starting to see the boat that says, you know, Coast Guard, and it's white, and it's coming for them. And they're immediately trying to hide the drugs that they've got on there. And I, believe it or not, don't know what to do, because my attitude is I'm in control of this boat. I have one seat. I have two guys. I have an engineer and a seaman who's going to handle the lines tying up to this thing. And I'm wondering, because we already had been fired at once by drug dealers, and I can see the marijuana smoke over the platoon boat. And I want to go get the holster with the gun and strap it on. And then I'm saying, God, why don't I do that? I can't think fast enough what I'm going to do.
Right.
So I figure, how do we keep this situation from getting worse?
Right.
Because they're already terrified of the boat.
Right.
It's just a 30-foot patrol boat, and I got to do this. This is my job.
Right.
You can't tie your boat up to the buoy because the ships can't see the damn buoy.
Right.
Okay. So I figured I'm not going to take any holster with the gun. We have just one holster and one gun on the board, on the boat, on board. And I figure I'll just get on the bullhorn and tell them that explain to them why they can't tie up and keep being tied up.
Yes.
On the other hand, I've also got a problem, because I realize that this particular strange platoon boat that's so much flat thing is on a list of suspected smuggling boats that have been spotted by people who have seen them come through these gateways
Right.
because all these jetting peninsulas go out and they want to take a shortcut through the land and come in. And they report this, and the description fits. And by my instructions, I'm supposed to go go on board,
Inspect the boat, right?
which I have to do, and I'm terrified.
Hmm.
I'm terrified.
Right,
As a cop, I got to write these guys up
right.
and I figure, okay, I got to explain to them on the bullhorn why they can't tie up.
Yeah,
They obviously know this.
right,
Then I got to explain to them that I need to come aboard to write you up to
right,
do this, and so let me on let me on board.
right,
I mean, I'm trying to say what is counterintuitive, but that's to put all of us in the place of the police who have to deal with it with which is going to be, they know, a difficult situation or
right,
one that could become confrontational. And so for me, I can't believe that in my lifetime the police, even though you and I and our intentions could quite agree with what a perfect situation or better, far better situation would be. Nevertheless, I figure if only we can get, as that mobile assistance community responder situation works, so many volunteers that could deal with preventing the police from making some situation best, just like Cat Brooks did when she got to the scene before they were going to, because they saw somebody drunk in the car parked
right,
off the highway and they're going to draw their guns on the whole thing that she, was able to save his life,
right,
probably. There are so many non-violent emergencies that the police in Oakland have to deal with.
right,
And somehow, if it involves mental illness, if it involves alcoholism, it involves family disputes, if it involves someone who's suicidal, even that, if I raised my hand and said, yes, I can study some things and I can volunteer, it still would be difficult for me.
right, right.
It still would be. And yet, that would be so far preferable to have someone unarmed, like me, trying to, or like you, even to try to just, make sure that you can take care of somebody who is mentally ill, not gun them down because they're, you know, it would probably reading the what's the newspaper online for the Oakland side. The Oakland side was talking about how, what was it, Eugene, Oregon has saved something like $15 million a year by dealing with this kind of community service that you can get involved in from
De-escalation,
preventing things from escalating to out of hand and just winding up crazy.
right.
Uh, uh, that I feel is probably the only realistic thing I could envision in my lifetime.
Absolutely, and they would have to be, again, medically trained, or like in my case, for de-escalation, it actually came around being able to talk down people who are having a overdose crisis. So they were particularly on some drug that wasn't prepared very well, and it was really screwing with their head. And being able to, talk them down is what we used to call it back in the day. And I think that same in the situation you're talking about could have been used in that situation as well. And maybe not even, there's always spirit of the law, letter of the law in my world. And of course, I do, always got a caveat too for the viewers, not the caveat that I have anarchist political values. So just because it was, I would say that you did not necessarily have to write them up. How intoxicated are they? Yes, they can't stay on the buoy. And yes, I need to inspect your boat and make sure you're not carrying weapons or any hard drugs. But if all you're doing is like out and there's pot in there, unfortunately, I'm not going to fault you for that. I'm going to hope that you will be responsible. And if you were to cause an accident or be acting too much of a fool, then we could escalate it after that. As far as, again, being the times that we have, as far as, which is also one of the things we were talking about as far as weapons, I wouldn't have like a pistol on there. I'd have a rifle. So you go on unarmed, but someone is armed on the boat with a laser sight. And if anybody messes with the crewmate, I will not hesitate to shoot. And I'm actually not shooting to wound you, right? So it would be it's a whole different ball game. It's like so much puts it back onto the individual that's in charge at the situation. I will say too, and then my version of shore patrol, ironically, the reason I was even doing it is because it was a punishment for something that infraction I had done wrong. Whether it could be as simple as like wearing earrings or letting your beard grow too long, but where it's like their version of community service, and it was in ports. So most of my interactions were with drunk sailors, either just being too drunk and rowdy, fighting. They didn't have money and they still went to get a provider, and when the woman wanted to get paid, he didn't have any money, and dealing with shit like that with drunk sailors in port. So I never had any sort of violence, and was thankfully always able to de-escalate situations and talk my way out of it too, if for nothing else too, in the sense too, I told him like, look, motherfucker, I don't want to be here either. I'm like, I'm not trying to bust your balls or anything, man. I'm like, I don't want to do this either, it's like, but let's just make it easy on everybody, right? You don't have to go in or anything, but like, we do need to not act like fools either. We're supposed to be grown people now, or who decided to join the military, just again, having those discussions with them. But again, piggybacking on that, when it is a mental health issue, having someone who is actually medically trained, psychiatrically trained and all that, too, which when we get to personnel too, I want to totally lift the standards of who can even apply, right, for it too. So for that specific service, those people are going to be medical professionals. They're not even going to be, they'll be working for a police department, but they're not going to be like law enforcement the way we think of a police officer. They're going to be medical professionals who are trained to deal with these type of issues. And so that we don't have people, like you said, that are actually having a mental health crisis, being gunned down for no reason, when we have people that can actually work with them. So I hope that we would do that. I think the green, if we had a green mayor. Oh, but that would be the other one too, being it specific to the Green Party, that the police chief, right, would be a registered Green Party member that was holding the Green Party values, right, the 10 key values, or whatever they would be as a charter, right? So you'd have a green mayor who backs them too. When we asked Gail McLaughlin, when she was a mayor of Richmond, how she did it, because there was like this huge shift. It since has shifted back, but what did you do? She goes, well, I fired the police chief and hired my own, and then he fired all the officers under him and hired new ones. We talked about that too, that everybody would have to reapply. Right? So you get your green police chief, and then they would now we kind of already transferred into personnel, but then they would re-interview all of the officers, and their record too. If they have histories of being completely brutal, it's like, yeah, you don't even need to apply, motherfucker, because we're not going to hire you because you're already shown that you can't handle the job. And also, a lot of people wouldn't get rehired too, because I would require that the education requirements be higher. Right? I'm not taking someone who couldn't even get into the military, couldn't be a mall cop, and dropped out of high school. right? You couldn't even get a GED, really. You couldn't get a GED, a general education degree, and then on at least an associate's degree in crime prevention or criminology or whatever you were going to try and apply for. Make that the new standard. I mean, they're already getting outrageous salaries, so make them earn it. That would be a good one in my book as far as like how to actually create all of that. Yeah. So that's how I would do it first. And same thing for all the officers underneath them. Like you'd all have to reapply, right? You'd have to reapply for your job. And if there was complaints, maybe that even goes into it as well, tied into with the services having a real police commissioner. Right? I mean, I'm old, so I remember the TV show, The Commish, when the police commissioner could hire and fire police officers, and we have that too, Citizens Review Board. Well, why not have one where it gives them actually a say in whether or not this police officer or whoever gets hired, fired, right? The fact that any sort of person can be put on leave and shown to have actually raped, trafficked young girls or anything, and still find a way to be on some police force somewhere. I don't know how anyone can ever dispute that there is a systemic problem with policing, aside from the fact that it only started out as being fucking slave catchers, right? I mean, again, the whole tree is rotten, right? We need a whole new tree, right? We need to tear this fucking tree down, start all over, find a new seed, plant it, and then grow it up again, right? So all those fucking officers have to go all the time, easily. So I hope that answered the question, though.
Last time we talked about forcing the Oakland Police Department to buy the insurance that would cover misconduct of any of their officers.
Yes.
And then, of course, the insurance companies are going to demand that there's some kind of transparency in reporting all the incidences that people, are going to report happen to them, and not have that just destroyed or hidden or not made public, but obviously has to be there for the insurance companies to go and look at that and say, well, we're not going to insure this guy.
Right.
And then that creates problems.
Right. Well, I also thought that anytime there is misconduct comes out, instead of having it come out of taxpayer dollars, it comes out of their pension. I mean, it's still tax dollars that funds it. Take it right out of the pension fund. Sorry, right? I guess you're not buying that boat there, Officer Johnson, right? And I think that would also make it so that they would, kind of straighten up, fly right more often, right? At least hesitate if they know that they're, if anything else, it would put peer pressure going to look, at least stop getting caught because you're taking money out of my pocket, right? And we live in a corrupt capitalist fucking society. So when money fucking talks, right? You start hitting them in the pocket, all of a sudden everybody, oh my God, really? And that would be a good one. And if I can use that transfer too. So transportation, ways to make police force more green. Most people know that I'm like a huge vegetable oil fan. I don't even like electric cars. Like, where are you going to put all the fucking batteries? But we do have a lot of corn in this country. We grow a lot of soybean, and there's a lot of waste oil that comes from that. And I think that it is possible nationwide that we could end up being run on biodiesel. So it would be switching from gasoline powered vehicles straight over to diesel vehicles, everything from the fucking patrol cars. Hey, if anything else, you could tell, like, look, you're going to get to drive like a really nice Mercedes or a nice Volkswagen or something of that nature. And even for the buses transporting prisoners back and forth, they have court dates, everything. All those buses are already diesel, right? And you don't have to do any conversion on it, especially here in the Bay Area where our climate is still pretty temperate. The only time you have to worry about it is if it gets too cold. Vegetable oil will solidify, but I've never had that here in the Bay Area, ever. And I've, of course, been running straight veggie oil cars for decades now. So having all those things switch over, but then also making transportation also more ergonomic, even if someone, because we're supposed to, I thought, we're innocent until proven guilty. So even if someone is getting arrested, they're still innocent until you can prove that they've actually done whatever it is. I don't even care if you saw it, whatever the fuck it is. You got to come up to a bunch of fucking actual your peers, and they got to say, yeah, you said they did that. So until then, why don't we treat people with respect? Of course, I think we should even, we're not talking about the prison system itself. We're only talking about policing, but change the way that we incarcerate as well and go back to rehabilitation. But for the moment, so that you have, ergonomic, that people are once they're, a lot of times too, people they're arresting houseless. So when they get in, they get food, right? Water, medical attention, right? It makes you shower, right? I'm big on cleanliness too. So which cuts down then on any sort of issues when they're locked up in close quarters, right? For pandemic preparedness or just general illness and whatsoever. So having transportation that is more people friendly, right? We're starting to give people, also treat them with respect, no matter what. I don't care what it is, especially now, because a lot of times the people that are getting injured and these lawsuits that are doing, whether if they're lucky to not get killed, are over such minor shit, right? You were smoking in a park, or for bullshit, or the biggest crime ever is, oh, you hurt the fucking officer's feelings, right? They came at you fucking so when you decided on that day, well, you know what, I'm not going to let you. I'm going to assert my actual fucking rights that are given to me by my ancestors and not let you talk to me like I'm some bitch. Especially when you're a fucking supposed to be a public servant. And that is one of the worst crimes, right? And that's like Chris Rock does a joke too. It's like, oh, don't like disrespect an officer, because one thing we know about officers, when they come back mad, if they come back mad, they're bringing an ass whipping with them, right? But having that, again, goes into doing that too. And like I said, everything from the cars on the street to shit, man. Looking every transport, anything that you have to transport people in, right? And it's going to be a police vehicle, make it run on vegetable oil. Any questions on transportation?
I can't remember, did we mention that probably the big picture, and the big picture here, the big problem is the incredible, terrible gap between the rich and poor in this country. And as long as there's this savage economic inequality, I don't know how you put food on your table if you can't get a job or afford things. And there you go with eliminating that with a guaranteed basic income would be a tremendous help. It would cost something like 2% of the national defense budget.
Well, there is no doubt that what we are talking about is a non-monogamous approach to communities, right? Where everything has to work in partnership with each other. All of the systems, when we have these discussions on education, right now policing, whether it be on just basic sanitation services, anything, even when we do how we communicate with each other, linguistics, town halls, all this has to be like in conjunction with each other. And it's more like a multi-tiered approach to changing really the fundamental way that we think of ourselves, we think of community, and just what is important on quality of life issues, and what that actually means in a general sense, like what is a quality of life. And definitely what we're talking about here within the police system is being treated like people is definitely, I think, a positive, rather than a negative. Most people agree with that as well. But our next one is actually interesting. It'd be about weapons and what type of weapons would a green police system look like? Would we do it at all? Because one of our 10 key values, and I personally am not a fan of it because I believe in definitely in defending oneself, is nonviolence. Even though I think that there is, one, demilitarize the police completely. Right now, they've proven that they cannot handle it, and until I think that they would prove that they could, like no toys for you, as it were. Um, and if you needed something like that big where you needed military style weapons, then I hope that's an emergency that requires the National Guard. Otherwise, if I can get it straight. But what we're also talking about here too is, again, a lot more de-escalation services. So weapons aren't going to be needed in the police system that we're talking about. They're locked up like it's a militia somewhere. And it would have to be some, I think, a severe hostage situation. But even then, when I say it out loud, I'm like, nah, fuck that. Pass that over to the National Guard too. Let them deal with the fucking military. I don't want to fucking deal with it. I don't want my police actually dealing with anything like that in that aspect. I want them to be more community police minded. And we want to hire from the community, which is good back to personnel. So there wouldn't be very many no military style weapons whatsoever. I had mentioned before, taekwondo and blunt weapons, maybe some edged weapons. I know that's like a personal preference for me, and that's kind of sick and twisted in itself. but having those techniques better. And I know the general American population doesn't like to see it, but everywhere else around the world, that's how they do things. They don't walk around with armed police dealing with shit, with drunks, fucking during spring break and all that shit. That's not how they, deal with it. Everything is self-defense minded and just blunt weapons. The tasers now are really, really popular as well. But I don't think tasers really work, especially if the person's like really intoxicated on hard drugs. Like, yeah, I ain't gonna fucking phase them whatsoever. Right? You can see tons and tons of videos of people getting tased and they're like drinking it like water. So that would be the easiest one. We're not gonna have a lot. I would go again with more blunt weapons and more just hand-to-hand determinations, because I've seen known people, if you're within 5 feet of me, I don't care if you got a gun or not, man. I bet I take it out of your hands before you can actually shoot me. So, and if you have that type of training and you're having those type of people, again, also, it's like the military, right? Being a police officer is a dangerous job, right? That's why you get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. Get used to it. So,
what about the NRA? They're not going to ever allow that kind of situation where in violent emergencies, they're going to take the guns away from the police.
Well, that goes back to the electorate and convincing people that people before profit candidates can get elected and will actually implement these things. And as far as how that works with the NRA, because now I'm not beholden to those donations into the police fund or my campaign or anything whatsoever. So the NRA becomes obsolete, right? So yeah, I mean, of course, it's going to be a fight. And again, I go back to the multi-tier non-monogamous approach to social justice, where everything kind of has to happen in conjunction with each other. How that would really play out. So now we have Cornel West, who is a pretty big name, right? Trying to run for vote. How do we translate that into local offices as well, right? Even in the nonpartisan races, but people that are still registered green or at least have progressive, radical progressive values. How do we convince those people to run, that they will have staff and people will be behind them? And then that in turn triples to the actual voters and going, oh, look, they did find somebody, who I know and trust, and, they don't talk no shit. So that's how you would, have to make the NRA obsolete, in that way too. Yeah. But there are, and again, trying to, well, also my own personal approach too is more of a fuck you attitude. It's like, really, people, I know we are not that stupid yet that we don't realize that the NRA is just a lobbyist for gun manufacturers, right? They want you to keep militarized police because they're selling all those guns to them, right? They want us to keep it a heightened state of fear because we're buying all those guns. People go crazy to a point where there's like bullet shortages and shit like that, where they can't even get the weapons because we're so fucking scary, right? Well, I'm not scared. I ain't scared of nobody. I don't know. Call me from, I always say that too. Call me from North Philly, but I'm just not afraid, And I'm not gonna live my life that way. But anyway, fuck the NRA, right? Again, that was all fucking Ku Klux Klan shit anyway. So you just have to, again, be able to project that to the people. And always been the Oakland Green stance. and the people that aren't participating now, that aren't registered to vote, like, I'm not trying to convince, I'm not trying to convince someone else that's already to really change their mind. I want to prove to the larger masses who aren't participating in the system that, if you actually do, we have something to offer you, you know, and see it for yourself. Don't fucking take my word for it, man. I'm just a big mouth, right? Come and do it. So, yeah. Weapons and more. The next one, personnel, and I do want to still probably even come back to that, but the next one I want to go into is buildings, facilities, logistics and stuff. We talked about transportation, but I've been kind of on a kick too that with climate change, we're going to have to start thinking about, as we build into our housing situations, whether it be for businesses, factories, anything, that we're going to really have to take climate change into an account. That means we'll be able to sustain the power we're going to need in these 125, 14-day stretches of, 120 and higher temperatures. Are we going to be able to do that, right? A lot of places we see, like in Texas, aren't going to be able to. There's one where I think, even though it does tear up the earth in negative ways too, but going solar, just, large fields of solar power, and still wind power. I don't know about the offshore one so much, because I think the oceans are going to be super, super violent, and there's no way you're going to be able to stop water if it wants to move you. But I thought of that too. So having buildings with, proper ventilation, and again, for pandemic preparedness, if they're going to keep on trying to bust us up with the money's in the medicine and not the cure, then, we have to somehow combat that. And I think having hospital grade ventilation systems would be great, even in a green police system as well, making them run on solar, right? Especially their backup generators. So when it goes down, they have some sort of way, instead of running. Well, actually, you can get diesel generators and run it on vegetable oil. You won't have to worry about petroleum and things if the grid goes down. So I think those are all very, very important things. Okay. All right. So I said I wanted to come back to personnel and having higher education and doing that, but I wanted to talk a little bit before we end about community policing and kind of what that means to me, and actually hiring people from the community. The reason the police can't live in the community now is because they're racist, sexist, homophobic bastards that are killing unarmed children at a rate of 1 a day. So they can't live in the community because the community would fuck up their houses, right? It would fucking take retribution on the bullshit. If fucking Officer Friendly lived right next door and they just shot your cousin, right? Because they fucking grabbed a soda out of the fucking corner store. But if you flip that, right, to the same people that were, same thing like when, that should be another town hall talking about cannabis business. If we actually gave more attention to getting the people, the nickel bag deal off the street, and actually giving them dispensaries, it's the same thing. So if you went to the people who know the community and said, hey, here's the new system. If you buy into it, would you be willing to be a police officer, and try to recruit people in that way? If you need to, again, give them that associate's degree. Oh, look, great. Now we're giving people higher education, tax dollars working back for, the good of the community, instead of for corporate tax breaks or whatever the fuck they use our money for. And having that, and then all of a sudden it's easier, because then Vicente could just go up to you, or fucking someone I respect can come up to me and going, hey man, let's calm it down. Is everything okay? How can we help? And the police officer, because they've already been your neighbors. Right? And having that be important too. But I think that still goes back to starting at the top, getting rid of all of those officers. They're so corrupt, and they've killed so many people, and then they just move on from place to place to place. It's almost like priests in the Catholic Church raping children, right? They don't get any consequence. They just move to a different fucking diocese. Same thing here, right? You get busted for wrongful death, And then instead of being, you're not hired in Oakland anymore, you just move to Vallejo, or you just go to Walnut Creek, or you just go to Orville, right? Or whatever. Or worse, they fucking put you in San Quentin. Oh, we'll just get you into fucking, or Santa Rita County Jail or some shit like that way you join the sheriff's department. So I think that also needs to stop as far as personnel goes as well. Anything else? CNN, well, that was good.
Well, let me ask you one quick question.
Course.
What's your opinion about the movement to try to vote her out of office, our district attorney, Pamela Price?
Let me do a gender role here. Nope, using tools like a monkey. You know, it gets so crazy with one person doesn't like someone. I think a lot of times when they do these recalls and all that, I mean, I was never so much of a fan at the beginning. You know, again, when we're talking, it's all right. Talking about green police systems, I would definitely, again, have people who are more radical progressive running for all of those offices. And that's definitely, I think that's a whole nother discussion, you know, another whole nother 30-minute discussion on, you know, how would we, you know, having green legislators, green lawyers, right, green judges as well, you know, and district attorneys and assistant district attorneys with radical, you know, again, progressive value. They don't necessarily have to be green, although we, of course, right, you know, we are, you know, hoping to build the Green Party to be the first, like, alternative party that's actually up there. I'm not beholden to that as long as they have the same people before profit, radical progressive values. If you know that label makes any sense to the 20 people that'll view this and us three here. So, you know, also the people that are actually pushing for it, I'm not a super fan either. The different like groups, and there's a couple of officers there too that want to see her go. So like, oh well, if you want, then it's all because they want their own person in. You know what I mean? It's all corrupt. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everyone. This is Vicente Cruz. I'm the Oakland Greens event and fundraising coordinator, and this has been our July virtual town hall on what a green police system would look like. We look forward to seeing you at History of the World Part 1 at our free movie night, which is the last Sunday of every month, January through October. And yeah. And, oh, and the Oakland Greens open public monthly general meeting tomorrow evening. So we'll see you on the next one. Peace, everybody.